So how we started, so I've been a midwife since 2002. Before that, I was a nurse, and in my experience as a midwife, I have come across, not commonly, but ladies who have asked questions that have made me think outside of the box and where there aren't any existing service provision for. So, for instance, when I started in the maternal medicine team, and we have a joint neurology clinic. One of the ladies who came, who'd had a stroke, had a good discussion with the doctors, and when she left, she said to me, "Oh, I just wanted to ask you, because I can't use my left arm, how do you think I'm going to be able to carry and feed my baby?" I did the best I could, going through various things, and also with the infant feeding specialist. It wasn't quite enough. I realised there was a gap, needed to do better. Another lady asked me how she was going to push her pushchair, which uses a white stick for a visual impairment. Couldn't quite come up with any useful solutions there, really. Another lady has POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and with certain triggers, it can feel very dizzy and faint, and those ladies really do have to adapt certain things to their life. And that lady was worried about how she might manage with the baby with her POTS symptoms. And in a postnatal visit, I'd never met a lady before, and I went to see her in her first floor flat with no lift. She was a lone parent, and she had cerebral palsy and was using a walking aid. And she had a small toddler, 2 years old, and a baby. And she said to me, I haven't got any help, and I don't really know how I'm going to get out of my flat. And she didn't have any food, she didn't have any shopping. So clearly there was a big piece of work that was needed at that point, and it really galvanized me into action, because I thought, actually, we've had a whole pregnancy to plan for this lady, and here we are in the postnatal period putting in some emergency care. So with increasing awareness of a maternity gap for women with additional needs, I approached my super friends, and obviously we've got a great champion and consultant midwife for maternal medicine, Carolyn Romer at St George's, who leads the team that I work in. And we discussed it ongoing, and she supported me every step of the way. And then knowing that I needed something more outside of my scope, I needed therapies, and I knew from my time as a nurse that occupational therapists have a unique set of skills to help people adapt and increase their independence in certain situations. And so I knew from the outset we need an OT, and I'd never heard of an OT working in maternity. So I approached Jeremy Nugent, who was then the therapies lead at St George's. Took me a while to get hold of him, and had to be really tenacious to do it, but eventually I jumped on him in his office while I was having lunch and said, "I'm going to pitch this to you, and I really want you to listen." He did, and I asked him to come alongside maternity and provide some OT support. And he asked for volunteers, and Elizabeth Lyle, who's still part of the project but not currently in the country, and Cheryl Edwards came along to scope the service, have a look, see what the needs were, and eventually start a pilot to create a collaborative service between midwifery and occupational therapy. Infant feeding specialist, absolutely every woman coming through our service needs infant feeding, bespoke, tailored, additional input. And Anna Cannon is an incredible infant feeding specialist at St George's. So she came alongside, as did Hannah Wallace, who was working for a local charity at the time, because we realised we needed someone who was a baby wearing sling specialist. So there's a lot to know there, but actually it's quite a key element of enabling some ladies, not suitable for everybody, but some ladies' independence. So Hannah Wallace also joined our group, and so we created our first core group to start a pilot service. We had a look at what St George's offers, and also what the stats were. How many women have disclosed that they have some sort of disability or additional need? and it was very unrepresented. So I knew I was looking after ladies who had additional needs, but it wasn't showing up on their booking questions, and they weren't coming out in the stats. So we knew that we had to do a better job of identifying women and capturing those women in order to give them an enhanced service. Cheryl and Elizabeth did a brilliant job of scoping locally, nationally and internationally, looking for pockets of services with occupational therapy, maternity, to support women with disabilities, and found small pockets. We even found someone as far as New Zealand who was a lecturer lecturing in this area, but nothing ongoing and nothing in the antenatal period, and no collaborative midwifery occupational therapy service, which surprised us. And then we listened to the women, of course, because women shape the service. So the women I was looking after with significant medical conditions were shaping the service with me, because we were trying to problem solve together, and they continue to do that. So we ongoing evaluate through the women. Is it a midwifery issue? Well, yes. There's an estimate. These are estimates. There aren't any specific statistics, but it's estimated that 9.4% of mothers in the UK have a long-standing illness which may cause a disability. And 53,000 parents in England have a learning disability, so an intellectual disability with an IQ less than 70. And the RCM acknowledged that increasingly people with a learning disability, physical impairments and chronic health problems are using maternity services. So there's a legal imperative, of course. So there's plenty of legislation that stipulates that as health providers, we must make reasonable adjustments and equalise access for people with additional needs and disabilities. There's a UN convention, the Equality Act, which underpins many services, a Human Rights Act in 1998, which stipulates that health providers should take all reasonable steps to help you have a family, including giving advice and support before and after your child is born. So these are the things that we base our service on. NHS England, definitely worth a look at this document, Accessible Information and Communication Report, which came out in 2016, which all public social and health services have to comply with, and actually has got a really useful, usable tool that you can use to implement in your service. But it's likely that all services will have had some oversight about that report. Public Health England have got loads of resources for equal access, easy read, etc. And the good practice guideline, if you're looking after any parents with a learning disability, is definitely the guideline to look at, because it's got some really valuable resources in there, and really teaches us as a maternity unit and midwives how to look after parents with learning disabilities. Birthrights, brilliant organisation, have done some great research around disability. Much more work is needed by maternity services to provide high quality, individualised care to all disabled women, ensuring that they're given information they require to make decisions about their care in a way that respects their knowledge about their own body. Because remember, the women are experts in themselves. We scoped the social media, and that really reflected what we had already seen in the research and from the women that we were looking after. So women reaching out to RNIB and Mumsnet, different social media resources, saying, I don't really know how to manage this aspect of my pregnancy or my baby care with this impairment. So reaching out for information elsewhere because they weren't getting the information from their maternity services. We created a pathway. So we originally scoped and did a pilot, and within that we needed to identify the women, and we know that lots of women won't identify as disabled. And we need to be expansive about taking histories. So we need to think about chronic pain, women who are adapting their lives around chronic pain, chronic fatigue, weakness, balance, physical impairment, sensory loss, autism, Asperger's, ADHD, OCD, seizures. So we've started to do a big piece of work about raising awareness, disability, and we created a referral process into my team, and we triage all of the women who were referred. So we usually make a call, or whichever accessible information communication portal they use. It might be face-to-face with a BSL interpreter, and we have a chat about what they anticipate they might need from their pregnancy, birth and parenting. And often these women have thought long and hard about it before they got pregnant. And sometimes there's things they haven't necessarily thought about that we talk about, and they highlight to me. From that, I work out what we need to do next. But what we absolutely always do is locate a named midwife, or link that lady with a continuity of carer, because all of these ladies will need enhanced input, and a named midwife is invaluable, because knowing a midwife and the midwife knowing you, especially where there are complex issues, really important. So then we make a plan. So I work out who they need to see, and when, and what sort of care plan, care pathway is suitable. And for the complex cases, because Cheryl is extremely busy, she runs a very busy service, has been redeployed for COVID, etc., etc. So I'm really discerning about who I refer on to Cheryl. So I use some of my own expertise, but it doesn't come anywhere near, obviously, the skill set that Cheryl has. So I keep the complex cases for Cheryl, and we see the ladies together, or one of my maternal medicine midwife colleagues see the ladies with Cheryl antenatally, usually in the antenatal clinic, because we have space issues at St George's, like most hospitals, in the second trimester. So it gives us time to plan ahead. And Cheryl goes through a detailed assessment and generates a report and an information pack, and may see the ladies a second time, and has done some home visits as well. All ladies will have a bespoke one-to-one infant feeding session, and then we create an individualised plan which incorporates our environment. What barriers does our maternity unit create for people with additional needs? What are their communication needs? Sometimes we have to do very detailed communication plans to ensure we equalise access to that. We look at the supporter. So often the woman's more dependent on the supporter. So we need to work out what we need to do for that person, that plus one. And sometimes that person will also have their own needs. And we do it all alongside the woman. So I write it together with her, or Cheryl writes it together with her, or one of my colleagues does, and we agree it and then disseminate it across a unit to ensure that everybody's comfortable. So it's a seamless process going through the maternity unit, and that's supported by our doctors and our midwives and our healthcare assistants. We look at skill mix and staffing needs, equipment, etc. We supported over 100 women and 4 dads since 2017. Some of the cases only require a small amount of input, might be, large print, or an adjustment to the environment. But some cases are very, very complex, and Cheryl and I can be in meetings with 12 other professionals of whole variety, social, primary, secondary care, and we work also alongside some charities and Signpost. So just having a quick overview of the different ladies that we see with different disorders. So our leading cases that we see are ladies with neurological disorders. So that includes hemiplegia following a stroke, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, spina bifida. FND is functional neurological disorder. Noonan syndrome, paraplegia, neurofibromatosis, dystonia, weakness, myasthenic syndrome, MS, CVA, strokes, I've already said, brain tumour. And I haven't included epilepsy in that group, but I see around 30 plus ladies a year who we give seizure adaptive advice to. And then our second leading cases for additional needs are chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and I should have included in there pain, but certainly those ladies need a lot more input. Achondroplasia, which is short stature, ladies with a limb amputation, learning disability, autism and Asperger's, cancers, ladies with hearing impairment. I've got a lady at the moment who's able to speak. Partially sighted ladies, a lady with severe asthma, bariatric and cardiac disorders, MSK, which is musculoskeletal, and postnatal neurology. So we work together with the neurological wards that Cheryl works in for ladies that are readmitted, possibly with an MS relapse, for instance, or a stroke after they've had a baby, to keep the family together. And then that's my bit, almost, and over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Trudy. as a non-midwife, I was just going to thank you very much for inviting me to speak this evening. Very much appreciated. As you and Sue said, been very fortunate to have been part of this project since the beginning, really, and to see it grow and develop. And I have learnt so much from my midwife colleagues, and absolutely take my hat off to the amazing profession that is midwifery. So I want to say that. My background is an occupational therapist. As Trudy said, I work at St George's with her. I have specialised in neurology or neurosciences since 2004. Predominantly work across my current role. I work across acute neurosciences and neurorehabilitation. So working, St George's has a tertiary neurosurgery, neurosciences centre, as well as a tertiary neuro rehab centre. So we have people referred in for complex neurosurgery interventions and for rehabilitation from across southwest London, Surrey, Sussex, and sometimes parts of Kent and Essex. So it's quite a wide field. Prior to doing this project, we had women through neuro rehab who had a neurological event, a stroke or another event, quite soon after having a baby. And actually a lot of the focus of our rehabilitation was around maximising their independence, around their parenting roles, and the beauty of occupational therapy is it's client-centred, and thinking about what are their goals, what do they want to achieve through their rehabilitation. And a lot of the time it was focused on being able to care for their child and have that role as a parent. So it needed to be innovative and creative and think about how we could support that. And then through working with Trudy, developing this service and thinking about antenatally how we can support that. And a lot of what we do is signposting and making sure that we're getting the right services and the right setup in place for the ladies for their parenting journey ahead. So what can we support as OTs? So practical physical things such as thinking about one-handed techniques. I've got our baby Dolly here, so I shall show you. I'll try and show you a few things in a minute. Thinking about baby carrying for wheelchair users. So one of the ladies that we had in the clinic had a spinal condition and an amputation, so predominantly moved around on the floor. So she used her upper limbs for her mobility. So then one of the things that we were thinking about is how is she going to safely carry her baby whilst being able to move herself around at home. Thinking about equipment, and when we think about equipment, we talk about regular baby products that are in John Lewis. I was going to say Mother Care, but that's no more, is it? John Lewis and other baby marketing places. So thinking about, buggies and what kind of adaptations they may need to existing pieces of kit that they could get in regular shops, what kind of bespoke adaptations they may need for that, but also thinking about kind of core OT equipment. So thinking about a perching stool that can be height adjustable, that can mean that somebody can sit up at a changing table and be comfortable and well supported to be able to change their baby's nappy or to get their baby dressed. Thinking about being able to for them as their pregnancy develops, thinking about how they're going to be able to get in and out of the bath, is that may create more balance or mobility issues for them. So thinking about a bath board, for example, or some other bathing equipment. So practical kind of strategies that might help there. Quite often, if some of our ladies who come through clinic have had either a head injury or a neurological event, they may have some cognitive impairment. So thinking about what strategies would be best to be able to support them through their further kind of antenatal clinics when they come in for delivery and their postnatal care. And then if there are any other teams or services that we need to refer them into, for example, community neuro rehab teams and things that may be able to support them as they make that transition into parenthood. As Trudy's mentioned about thinking about the environment, thinking about what we might need to get set up for delivery for them, for the ward environment, for their room, but also thinking about at home and leads on to kind of energy conservation adaptation, thinking about having multiple change stations around the house so you don't need to be carrying baby and nappies and everything around if you have a mobility issue, for example. A key one as a mum, I know that fatigue management is a key issue. when you've had a neurological condition or a brain injury or suffer from chronic fatigue, that is obviously exacerbated. So thinking about strategies and pacing and planning and things that you could put in that would make that a little bit easier. As I said, one of the key things is around making sure that we're signposting and referring mums and dads into the right services. So thinking about the changing needs of the child and the parent. So for example, if it's a new event for the parent, that they may be going through rehabilitation, so they may be recovering, so their needs will change. But equally, if it's a degenerative condition, that they may deteriorate, so making sure that they're linked in with the right services, and also thinking about the developmental needs of the child and the milestones they'll be hitting. So thinking about that, the equipment and the environment and the setup is going to need to change as the child grows. So making sure that longer term they're well supported and linked in with the right services, that they can get the pieces of equipment or the advice and the information at the right time when they're making those transitions. I've learned a lot about play, and using one of the things as an occupational therapist, our core is around activity analysis and looking at daily living tasks and thinking about parenting as an occupation and how we can maximize the independence of our mums and dads to be. And I was seeing a lady on one of our neurosurgical wards who had a 6-month-old baby, and we were the team that was seeing her, they were struggling to get her to engage in assessments. She was quite low in mood, and this is pre-COVID, her baby was able to come onto the ward, and actually what we were able to do was to do a play session on the ward, and we were able to do nursery rhymes, and I won't sing, but we were able to do some of the actions of wind the bobbin up, and actually we were able to use that as a really powerful assessment tool, because we could see that she had bilateral hand use, she could remember the words of the song, she could remember the tune, she knew what was coming next, and there was beautiful interaction between her and her baby. So we could see that cognitively a lot of the things that we thought maybe had been affected were actually intact, and it was maybe more of a mood and her situation of being in hospital and away from her child. So it was around kind of being creative and innovative about how we use those skills. And as I said, around signposting and involving the right services, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I've put in there perinatal mental health. This is not my area of expertise, and I know that there are amazing occupational therapists out there who do work in this area, and actually through the power of this forum I've actually been able to link with a few, so that's hopefully something that we can join up a little bit more for our service in the future. So one of the key things we think about is the environment. So not only thinking about the antenatal kind of clinic environment when they come in, but also longer term thinking about, you know, where they want to have their baby, the sort of experience that they want to have for delivery, and then practical things. So often after our initial antenatal appointment, we might review them at a later date and see them up on delivery suite, for example, or on the birthing, you know, the birthing pool, birthing suite, that's the word. So thinking about, you know, if they want to use the birth pool, can they do the steps to get into the pool? Have they got sufficient balance to be able to do that? Is there any adaptations that we could provide? So we were able to put like a Reebok step to make some of that a little bit easier for somebody to get in. Do they need a single room with ensuite if mobility is an issue? Thinking about if they have any sensory loss, so in particular visual impairment or hearing impairment, thinking how we adapt that tour of the area and limit distractions and noises and sounds. And equally an important part of that is thinking about, for the ladies who have had, for example, a neurological impairment, thinking about sensory overstimulation, sensory overload, and actually coming into a very busy ward environment with lots of noise, lots of light, people coming in and out all the time. It can be very overwhelming for them, which can make them very fatigued, can impact on their cognition and their ability to process information. So thinking about how we set up the environment in terms of lighting, in terms of the sort of limiting distractions, making perhaps one key person as the person that will speak at any one time, thinking about keywords and information so that we can support those kind of cognitive and sensory processing difficulties if they're there. Thinking about how wheelchair accessible the area is or needs to be. And then practical things, thinking about the bed height. So we had a lady with achondroplasia, so even when the regular hospital beds were at their lowest, it was still difficult for her to be able to transfer on and off the bed. So problem solving around that, thinking what practical solutions we could put in to enable her to be able to get onto the bed by herself. Thinking about the cot height. So again, the standard cots that were on the unit were too high for this lady to be able to reach to lift her own baby. So thinking about those kinds of things. Practical equipment on the ward, thinking about transfer aids or a perching stool, for example, things that we would be able to get in place and set up before planned delivery dates so that their mum to be knows that everything is ready and everything is set up for them. Thinking about, if they have a visual impairment and they need an assistance dog, for example, and also the person that's going to come with them and what their needs are, and making sure that they can be with mum and that they're well supported as well. And then more your area than mine, but thinking about the positions for birthing support. And as Trudy said, individualizing these birth considerations, putting them into a plan that the mum-to-be is happy with, that as a team we can support, and disseminating that plan around the team so everybody is happy and aware of what the plan is and what's going to happen. So thinking about baby care, so as Trudy said, so in our joint appointment, so Trudy does her midwifery specialism, which I do not pretend to do anything to do with that, and we really are guided by the ladies because they are experts. They are living independently, or they are, they have a routine, they have a way of living with whatever impairment that they have, and just it's thinking about how we can make that transition into parenting with them, and what advice or support or equipment or practical suggestions we could make so to maximize that independence. So thinking about practical things, so we'll have a think. We usually get them to talk us through kind of what their home looks like, who they live with, so we can think about practical things around, if going up and down the stairs is tricky at the moment anyway, do we need to organise maybe another rail on the stairs for them? We probably need to have a think about how they're going, if they need to carry that baby up the stairs, how are they going to do that safely? What practical things might we need to put in? We quite often get them to talk us through a kind of typical day, so thinking about what life looks like at the moment, if there's any particular challenges that they're having at the moment, anything that they're worried about, anything that they want to have a look at a bit more in the clinic. And then we have a variety of bits of equipment and kit that we can try out with them in the clinic so they can have a go at things. And we have a variety of the weighted dolls. So they can have a go, they can try it out, and at times they've been able to borrow the dolls as well and take it home and try it out within their own home environment, which has worked really, really well. So practical things, thinking about, we would do a full kind of assessment with them as well, so if it's appropriate, looking at kind of motor function, their power, their range of movement, their sensation, a very kind of brief look at sort of cognition, are they able to attend to what we're talking about? Can they focus? Can they recall what we've been saying? Do we need to write things down? Are there keywords? What works best for them? And then practically thinking about, so how they envisage that they're going to feed the baby, so thinking about, as well as obviously linking them in with the feeding team. We had one lady who had an upper limb amputation, so obviously that would have impact in terms of one-handed changing baby techniques, nappy changing techniques, how they're going to carry baby around, so thinking about the baby wearing the slings, baby carrying devices. If they are using a wheelchair, do we need to make any adaptations to the wheelchair before delivery? One-handed techniques, any baby cues or care, so thinking of those visual or hearing impairments or any learning impairments. And we often do quite a bit of joined up working with our colleagues in the learning disabilities team, but also in the learning disabilities occupational therapy team in the community as well for that longer term care. Changing, so thinking about their dexterity, their hand function, how they're going to wash their baby, get their baby into the bath. Is it going to be difficult for them to bend down to get into a regular bath? Do we need to think about a bath on a bath stand or over the sink bath, or perching stool for them to be able to do that? Maintaining the mother's role and what they want to be able to do independently, and what aspects of the baby care they want to be involved with. And as you've said, around managing fatigue and thinking about those symptoms and practical kind of fatigue management strategies. So what do we look at specifically in a clinic? So lifting and carrying. So we quite often have a tryout with baby Dolly here and carrying baby around, thinking about how we're going to move around indoors, but also thinking about outdoors, and it'd be really practical things about thinking about what buggy is going to be best. So there are different brakes on buggies, so hand brake, foot brake. You can now get buggies that have an auto stop brake on the bar, so when you let go it automatically brakes and locks. So obviously if you have somebody who has dexterity and fine motor difficulties, it's going to be potentially more difficult for them to use a buggy with a handbrake, so we can signpost them to buggies that have a foot brake that they may want to look at on the market. We don't endorse any products. We're very careful. We can't obviously endorse anything, but we can give a variety of things that they may wish to explore and to look at. We look at feeding positions and holding the baby in terms of postural support for the mum to be, and what pillows or support and things they may need, or if they're a wheelchair user, thinking about the wheelchair cushion or any kind of lateral supports or postural support that they may need to support that position. Thinking about nappy changing and cleaning, so one-handed baby techniques, amazing bits of kit. So the baby is actually in a baby grey that has magnetic poppers, so you can do them with one hand, do them up, and I mean they're a little bit more pricey than regular baby greys out there, but quite a lot of the women that come through our clinic absolutely love these because they can do this very easily and maintain independence with looking after their baby. Thinking about, as I said, how they're going to bathe the baby, and then thinking about sleep and where baby's going to sleep. One of the things quite often is where mums have difficulties with mobility is to, I mean, as a mum, I know that you're up several times a night getting up to feed baby or to settle them, and you know, if you have a mobility difficulty, or you need to put a ankle foot orthosis on before you can safely transfer, all of those things take a lot of time and can be even more fatiguing. So we quite often think about the kind of next to me type cribs where mum doesn't need to do that transfer, but baby can safely sleep next to mum, whilst obviously being very mindful of the risk of cot death and supporting that. And thinking practically about, you know, sometimes it's environment, thinking, you know, we've had, it feels a little bit like changing rooms sometimes when we're saying, if you push the bed up that way a little bit more, then you'd be able to get this in, you'd be able to have this. So sometimes it's practical advice at home, and I don't often get to do home visits, but where I have been able to go and follow mums up at home, it's been really great to be able to, you know, just kind of practically from an energy conservation or safety point of view, being able to suggest where bits of equipment and things might go to make things a little bit easier. What I should say is on the equipment front, there is very limited products out there on the market specifically for mums to be or parents with physical or sensory impairments, and quite often any of the items that are out there that are specifically made are quite expensive. So often what we're looking at is what products are actually out there already on the market that are easy for people to get, that we could that would meet their needs. But there are also amazing charitable organisations such as Remap and Demand, which can make bespoke adaptations to things. So for example, the lady we had with achondroplasia, trying to find a cot that she could lower the side to be able to reach her baby safely, and they were able to make a platform and things for her to be able to do that. So it's about kind of signposting and getting those services involved timely so that those things are ready for them. I spoke a little bit about this. So these are some of the buggies. So thinking about the handbrake, the foot brake, just practical things like that. And as Trudy said, we do a report that has all of the kind of recommendations and where we're going to refer and the signposting and things in. And then there's a more of a kind of information pack that mum gets too, which has kind of thinking about the specific things we talked about, so feeding and what kind of pillows and equipment might be useful, what kind of buggies they might want to have a look at, thinking about cots and those kinds of things. So, and it's bespoke to them, it's an individualized plan. Fatigue management, so thinking about, as a mum, we know that babies often do their own little thing and they sleep in the day and they're awake at night, and there's the mantra of sleeping when the baby sleeps. For someone who has fatigue and chronic fatigue, that can be really important, but also thinking about using fatigue management principles, so thinking about pacing and planning and prioritizing what you need to do in the day and what you want to do in the day, so that there's a good balance between the two. And considering, I have the 4 Ds, so do, delay, delegate and ditch. What things do I absolutely need to do today? What could I delay? What could I get someone else to do? And what's just not going to happen today? And trying to avoid this boom or bust. So where you feel that you have lots of energy and you overdo things, and then you sort of pay the price later, and then you're feeling worn out and then can't do the things that you maybe want to do or need to do. So practical things around, you know, considering having some help with meals or with housework, considering regular rest breaks in the day, just using those kind of principles of being able to think about what it is that they really want to be involved in with their baby's care, or what other activities they really want to be able to do throughout the day. As I said, a lot of what we do is around signposting and referrals on to other services. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to be able to follow people up you know, kind of over a longer period of time. So it's about making sure that we're referring them into the right services. And just to give you a bit of a flavour of where we refer people into, so often, for example, social services, occupational therapists who would be able to support with equipment provision at home, longer term sort of adaptations and things, and can follow people up for a longer period of time. Community rehabilitation teams, so that's community neuro rehabilitation, or we've sort of done chronic fatigue services and things. There's a whole host of amazing rehabilitation services that are out there. We've liaised with housing services, the bespoke equipment companies I mentioned, Remap and Demand, the sling specialists. We've referred to our local wheelchair services, so for example, where the wheelchair is no longer meeting their needs or won't meet their needs as their pregnancy grows, or their pressure relieving cushion isn't going to sort of sustain them through pregnancy, referring on for wheelchair services. Working closely with our women's health physio colleagues, so thinking about any pain or malalignment through the pelvis, or mobility issues that may develop through pregnancy. And then also the sort of voluntary sectors. So we have an amazing organisation in Wandsworth called Little Village, which can support with getting a whole host of baby care items, so nappies, clothing, prams, buggies, cots. Amazing organisation. And then also specific voluntary sector services, so for example through the MS Society or Different Strokes or Headway, so thinking about signposting through other sort of voluntary sectors that are out there.
Back to you. And finally, the woman's expert in herself, so we work in partnership with the women. We ask the women, as you've heard, occupational therapy is invaluable to maternity units, and yeah, we've learned such a lot. And you know, it's not easy to access occupational therapy, so we can be used as a resource to help with ideas of how to set up. Takes extra time. Obviously, we've used loads of our own time in between parenting and full-time work, etc., to do literature reviews, etc. Build it into your existing services. We haven't had any new funding for this. We've bolted it onto the services that we have. It might be useful to identify a disability or enhanced needs champion in your own maternity units. People have got a special interest in it. That's a really good place to start and grow. As I say, don't wait for funding, be innovative. We've applied for loads of different funding, and some been successful, some haven't. It's a legal imperative and a human right, so this isn't something that we can do as a voluntary service. This is something that women have the right to have legally, and women with chronic health problems need midwives. Most of those women are being seen by their doctors, but they really do need to be seen by midwives as well. Name midwives, absolutely crucial. And think about pregnancy, birth and motherhood, so that long-term view is really important. And thanks for listening, and
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting us to speak.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.